Hello, I am Genevieve Cooper, and I am here with you all tonight to talk about emotional chastity. So, just a quick intro about me. I went to school at Ohio State. That's where I got involved with SPO. And then I did 1 year of mission at UCF, where I had the great honor to be with Hannah, Preston, Josue, Gio. And then my second year of mission, I went over to Tampa at USF to help start that new chapter. And now, my third year of mission, I am working remotely on the admin side for Florida and just get the honor to be able to do things like this. And so I'm so excited to share with you tonight. Just kind of a preface to talking about emotional chastity, or emo chastity as I like to call it. I just pray that this content, that my witness convicts you of living a life with the Lord and doesn't condemn you. I'm not trying to condemn because, sister, I have been where you have been. I've been in college. I've been surrounded by temptations and boys and all of that stuff. And I had my questions too. So let's break it down. What is emotional chastity? So with chastity, I think we usually think of physical chastity. Maybe we think of purity, or even the negative connotation of prude. But what chastity really is the virtue of self-control and self-gift to be able to honor your own dignity and another person's dignity. 2 Timothy says, "For God did not give us a spirit of cowardice, but of power, love, and self-control." And really, with love, what do you think is the opposite of love? You might think, oh, easy, that's hate. But actually, the opposite of love is lust. And in a less eloquent definition than the Catechism, lust is essentially use. When we're looking to use somebody, whether it's for romantic things, but even if it's less than that, just using them as a body and not as a person with dignity created in the image and likeness of God. And so with this, I want to say about our desires. God has given us desires on our heart. And those are good desires, our desires to be loved, to love. But the question is here, how do we live out those good desires and remember who they are ultimately oriented to, which is God? Okay, so that's chastity. Now going into emotion. What is emotion? Emotions help us to react. They're neutral. They're not either good or bad. But when we use our emotions with reason and will, they actually work together to do what is good, to orient us to do good. And so they are helpers and guiders for us. And with emotions, we shouldn't let it be the driver of our actions, but we also shouldn't repress them. And so it's important to just remember that they're a tool for us. And so connecting these two things, emotional chastity, what is that? It's essentially the self-control and the awareness of our emotions and how they lead us in our thoughts, in our actions, in honoring our own dignity and someone else's dignity. That's what emo chastity is. And so whether that's relationships with guys, whether it's music we listen to, movies we watch, books we read, these things might distort or disorder our good desires that we have. And so we kind of have to be on guard to be able to protect our own dignity and worth, but also another person's. And so why is this even important? Like, what's the point of me giving you this talk? At the root of it, our hearts should be changed and convicted and transformed and be directed to honoring ultimately our relationship with God, because He is the one that satisfies every part of our hearts. It's also to be directed to honoring our brothers, our sisters, and our own dignity. If you want to hear more about this stuff, I'd recommend reading Theology of the Body for beginners, because it talks about how we as women and as men, our bodies are made to reflect the Trinity, and it's supposed to point to the Trinity. And ultimately, that is what we were made for, communion with Jesus, communion with the Lord. Okay, so our goal on earth here is to be as holy and as close to Jesus, whether in communion with him or in likeness with him, in order that we get to heaven. And on the journey of this, our emotions are a tool that help us to choose that in every action. And so again, the only thing that can satisfy our hearts is Jesus. And so what are the fruits of living emotionally chaste life? Ultimately, sisters, I have just been praying for freedom for you all. Freedom in 3 different ways. And these are the fruits of emotional chastity. First, freedom to know who you are, to know your identity, to have a solid foundation that you are a beloved daughter of the Father, that you are a beloved woman in the eyes of the bridegroom, Jesus. And so I just pray that in this time that you are able to have that solid foundation of identity, and that no other person's voice may change that or define you, only the Father's. So that's the first one. The second one is freedom from the expectations that we may set on guys, on men. Freedom from that disappointment we might experience, and freedom to them that they may experience freedom from that. And the third thing is freedom from our minds. I think we as women know that we overthink, overanalyze all of that stuff. And sometimes we might not realize how that chains us down. It chains us down to what that girl thinks of us, what that guy thinks of us. And it doesn't actually, our minds aren't living in freedom. And so that is a fruit that I pray for you all, freedom in your minds. Okay, so why am I, Genevieve Cooper, talking about this topic? I'm definitely not an expert, but I have lived and learned in many different relationships and friendships about the importance of emotional chastity. And ever since then, it has been a passion point of mine to share about emo chastity to all of the world. And so I want to bring you back a couple years ago to my junior year of college at Ohio State. That was the first year I was living in household, and I thought I had a free pass because one, I was dating my now husband long distance, so he wasn't at Ohio State. And so I thought I had a free pass to interact with the guys in household and community any way I wanted, because they knew that I was dating, that I was taken, that I wasn't a potential. And so that was one thing. Another thing was that I came into household and I came into community seeing brotherhood and sisterhood and not understanding the importance of each of them and how we need to know ourselves first, us as women, then we need to know how to relate as sisters, and then we need to know how to relate as sisters and brothers. And so I didn't understand the importance of that, so I was like, it's on me. I'm going to bridge this gap between brotherhood and sisterhood, fix everything, because the missionaries and the campus ministry don't know what they're doing about brotherhood and sisterhood. And I'm going to bring the communities together. So kind of 2 immature mindsets that I had. And so with this, it kind of led to unhealthy and unholy relationships with these guys, these friends. It led to an unholy curiosity that I would ask them super deep questions. And it kind of lent to an emotional attachment of oh, I know this about this guy and that girl doesn't know that. And so I felt like I kind of had some territory on these friends. And these guys ended up dating my friends, and my friendships with the guys kind of changed because I actually didn't really have the right to know those deep things about them as their sister. Yes, I can care for them and love them, but that wasn't my rights to know those things. And so specifically, I grew closer to one specific guy, and we preferred each other in group settings. We would always go to each other first. We would hang out one-on-one. He was the one that taught me how to play guitar and be able to lead worship, and we texted a lot. And meanwhile, this is all friendly, and I have a long-distance boyfriend. And so just all these things all bundled into one, I slowly, maybe I didn't realize it, but I didn't have freedom in my mind. I didn't have freedom in my prayer and with God because I was so confused And I didn't have freedom in my relationship with my long distance boyfriend because I knew that there was something off, but there was nothing that was physically happening between us. And it also hurt my relationships with the girls in my house because I was prioritizing guy friends over them. And so after realizing all this confusion, it kind of came into a culmination. And I was just like, something needs to change. Like, we need to have a conversation about this. And this guy was oblivious. And so in realizing this, we had a conversation about being more intentional. And it was really disappointing and hard because his response was kind of like, oh, I treat all the girls that I'm friends with like this way. And I was like, dude, that's confusing, not just for me, but for all of these girls. And so from this conversation, I was kind of able to help him realize the way he was relating to me. And we had talked about like, okay, we're just going to hang out in group settings. We're not going to just text randomly about random things. And we're actually going to focus on our friendships in our houses. Focus on sisters. He's going to focus on the brothers. And so it's hard because this friendship, it never quite recovered because it didn't start with the basis of true friendship and true brotherhood and sisterhood. We had that like emotional connection and all of that stuff. And that's why emotional chastity is necessary from the beginning. Last summer, I got married. And if that friendship in junior year of high school never changed and I got married, then that would be weird. And that would be weird for my husband. And yeah, that just like wouldn't quite make sense. And so this was definitely a hard lesson for me to learn because I didn't want to like lose this guy as that friend, but I also needed to have some type of boundary and guardrail with him. And so from that, it allowed me to realize the importance of treating my brothers as my brothers first, to have that foundation so that I can be friends with guys, but how it's important to cultivate that emotional chastity from the beginning. And I just want to give a shout out to when I was at UCF, being with Hannah, Gio, Preston, Josue. I'm just grateful for those friends and those brothers and sisters because I think they are great witnesses of it. And so, yeah, this gave me freedom to live just as a sister to these guys, to these friends. And so, yeah, just want to like note some unhelpful thoughts that I had in this time. First, I wasn't really living in the present objective moment. I was hanging out with this guy, hanging out with this friend, but I would get so confused and I'd be like, is God calling me to like end this other relationship, be with this guy? But this guy had never told me that he liked me. Or I would like just get lost in my brain, jump 10 steps ahead and like be like, oh, like what would it look like for us to date or like get married? How many kids? Like what our house looks like? And so I think this is a common narrative we might have as women. But for men, on the other hand, their kind of thought usually is like, oh, when I talk to you, I just like see you as a friend. Oh, I haven't asked you out, then that means I haven't expressed interest in you. And then if I do ask you out, I'm simply trying to get to know you better. But that doesn't mean we're going to get married, have 4 kids, in a house in the suburbs. So if you see that, notice like, guys are just so simple, and sometimes they're clueless to their actions and what they might be doing. And in this situation, this friend was clueless. And so, yeah, with this, we as women, we like incline more to the emotions, and we don't need these emotional attachments to false realities. So it's so important to stay in the present moment because we don't want to be set up for disappointment, sadness, agonizing over texts and calls and all of that stuff. And so just some real life examples. If a guy holds the door open for you or lets you go first in the communion line in front of him, or if they talk to you for a while at a community gathering, see it for what it actually is, the present objective reality, and thank God for the friendship you have with him. Don't overthink it. If a guy is interested, he needs to at least express interest. Say, I like you. Ask you out on a date. He needs to say date. And when you guys are officially starting to date, he needs to ask you, will you be my girlfriend? And sister, I just like want to talk about like, we as women, don't we want to be like intentionally pursued, intentionally romanced? Don't we want the guy that we're going to be in a relationship to be confident, to be asking God, like, do you have this woman for me? Do you have this relationship for me? Like, don't you want to like look back and be like, yeah, I am confident in this relationship with this guy because he discerned it with God and he was intentional with asking me out, going on a date and pursuing me. And so just all in this men's perspective stuff, I am giving the missionaries a list of resources. And so if you want to hear men's perspective on emotional chastity, let them know. There's a Spotify episode on it from some of my friends. And it's interesting to hear the guy's perspective on this because it's the same. And so now we're going to get into practicals. So the first thing is like some helpful guardrails or boundaries. Second one are some like helpful tools that we can use. So the first one, guardrails. Regarding one-on-one time, ask yourself the question, are you spending a lot of undefined one-on-one time with the guy best friend? And then that's leading to undefined actions or emotions? Are you spending so much time together that people think you're dating? Sister, I just like want to convict you that like, again, the guys that you surround yourself with, like you deserve to be intentionally pursued, intentionally spent time with, to have intentional actions and emotions. If you're just kind of slipping and sliding into, oh, we watched a movie, I don't know if it's a date or not, and then we end up kissing, like, don't you want the husband, the future husband of yours to like intentionally pursue you and intentionally do these actions? So I just want to say that. And so something that might be helpful with if you're having a lot of one-on-one time is to actually step back and just be in group settings. Get to know the guy in group settings, to know him as a brother, for him to know you as a sister, and just wait and pray that he, if he is interested intentionally, he will ask you out on a date. Another thing, texting and Snapchatting a lot, but the guy doesn't take you out. I don't want to be a broken record about this, but you are worthy of a date. You're worthy of getting dressed up, putting on some perfume, going out on a date. Do you find yourself constantly waiting for a text or agonizing, why hasn't he responded? What does this text mean? All of that stuff. Again, I just want you to live in freedom. Don't you want to just like live in freedom and just like live your life, hang out with your girlfriends, hang out in group settings, all of that stuff, and not be like stuck on your phone, like looking and just agonizing over it? So a helpful tool with this is maybe try limiting texting that person one-on-one, or maybe also try just cutting off all texts after 9 p.m. And just like letting yourself wind down, not be staying up till like 3 a.m. texting this guy that you are question mark relationship status, you know? Okay, next thing is oversharing on both parts. So we as women, again, have an inclination towards that emotional, so we love making emotional connections with other people. And so with a friend that's a guy, when we're asking like, oh, how are you doing? How's your week going? Blah, blah, blah. Like, is our intention to get some like insider, deep, vulnerable information of like, oh man, you're really struggling in this. Like, tell me more about it. Or is it because you're just genuinely curious and you genuinely care about how he's doing, and you'd ask any other guy that question and want to know how he's doing? With oversharing sometimes, when a guy starts to dive deep into all of his mess and his struggles and all that stuff with you, it sometimes feels really good of like, oh, he's like talking to me and sharing that stuff with me. But first, I want to say that you're not his mom. And in a relationship, you don't want to be your boyfriend, your husband's mom, or his savior. And so yes, you can care for him, you can be there for him, but most of the time he actually needs guys to process this stuff with. Because as a woman, we might not understand. I think same thing for us as women. I might be going through something and I like try to explain it to my husband and he tries his best, but just sometimes we as men and women just don't understand. And so I have learned that I like need to go to my sisters, even as a married woman, to talk about things, to process things, because they might understand my heart a little bit more in a different way as women. And so then also on your part, if you're sharing with guys, again, ask yourself, what are your intentions? Why are you sharing it? Is it because it might be out of getting attention from a guy? Or is it just because you're doing it out of care and you're not like spilling all of your beans and all of that stuff? Okay, so if you're seeing these red flags, I would just encourage you that you live in freedom, that the importance and the fruit of emotional chastity is freedom for yourself, freedom for that brother, freedom in your mind. And so draw a boundary, have an intentional conversation about what the friendship is, because you are worth being intentionally a friend and intentionally a significant other. So that's some guardrails, some tools for you. A thing that I love is called first thought, second thought. Okay, so emotions should reflect the relationships in reality. So that means maybe don't have a relationship in your brain that you don't have in real life. And it helps us to not overthink things. So what first thought, second thought is you're like at the gym and you see a cute guy and your first thought is like, whoa, he's attractive. And sometimes you can't like help that. But what you can help is your second thought. And so your second thought, it could either go down the line of, he's super cute. What if I like try to bump into him and like work out at the thing right next to him and then try to start conversation and then maybe he'll ask me out on a date and then we'll like get married and then we'll have 4 kids in the suburbs. You know, like this, I think we can like relate to this. Second thought with emotional chastity would be, okay, he is attractive. Thank you, God, for the gift of masculinity and for my desires and for my attraction, because attraction is good. And thank you for this brother. And then you stop your brain from spiraling. This is really hard, but when we get into practice of it, it gets easier. Again, I've mentioned this before, live in the present objective moment. An example is, okay, wow, me and this guy share all these same traits, all these same hobbies. Our lives line up so well and we always bump into each other. So God must have done this on purpose. That's one way to think about it. Another way to think about it is he's a really great guy. When these things happen between us, it's kind of confusing. I'm really grateful for our friendship, but the reality is he's never told me that he likes me. So do you see the difference there of just living in the present objective moment, seeing what reality is? Another thing is viewing the guys around you as brothers and not potentials. We as women, we don't want to be on the hunt everywhere we are. When we're in an event and we're like looking like, ooh, what about this guy? What about this guy? Or even we show up to an event and we know exactly where that guy is. That's when we're viewing guys as potentials, not just simply as our brothers. And that kind of gets into detachment. How would you feel if a guy that you were like thinking about all these things started to date your friend? Would you get upset? That might show, if you are, that like you feel like you have a stake on him or some territory on him. So just be mindful of that. Last thing, which is the biggest thing, is ask a sister to keep you accountable. It is so helpful to have a person that's outside of your brain to point out what reality is, what the real nature of the situation is, and also to encourage you that you are so worthy of love and that you have dignity and worth. And so it's super helpful to actually talk to a girl about this stuff, bring them into like, okay, I have this situation with this guy. What do you think? And actually being open to what she says. And do this with someone you trust. And yeah, just like having another perspective is always so helpful and helpful for accountability. Okay, so that was my spiel on emo chastity. And just want to end with some main takeaways. I've been praying for you all as I've been preparing for this talk. And as your sister, you guys probably don't know me, but I just pray for you. I pray that you may know your worth, your dignity, your identity as beloved, and not in the context of friendship, of relationship, whatever, but in the context of your relationship with God, God the Father, Jesus as the bridegroom. College is such a good time to figure out who you are, get a foundation of yourself, and having this strong foundation will bless you now and bless you in the future. For God willing, marriage to happen, vocation, all of that stuff. I want you to experience freedom from this. I hope that this stirred up questions. I hope this stirred up just thoughts about your life. And I just pray that our lives don't revolve around what ifs or potentials. And also like that we don't have a standard for like guys who aren't being intentional, who aren't holy, who aren't discerning what the Lord's calling them to. And yeah, I just like pray that you deserve the world. You deserve the world. And so I hope that this is encouraging and convicting, that it's not condemning. I'm not looking to call out anyone. And if you are kind of feeling like confused, maybe like you didn't like what I said, like bring it up to a missionary, bring it up to a staff member and talk more about it. I just pray that we're able to encourage each other as a women's community to live this out, to keep each other accountable. So thanks for listening to me. I pray that you guys have good discussion and that there's good fruit from this time. And yeah, I'm praying for you all. And I hope you have a great Women's Evening. That was so silly. Thank you. Bye.